Hi class. Today we're going to proceed with lesson 3 of Ethics and Social Responsibility, and this lesson is titled How Unethical Are You? So before we begin on this lesson, we'll probably take some time to talk about the bias tests that you did and see where you think about them, how you feel about them. Did it reveal anything special to you? Did it reveal anything revealing to you about how you think, about why you maybe have got the results that you did? One thing I want you to consider when thinking about these tests is not that maybe you have racial bias or are biased for men or women or career or family or whatnot, but it's to kind of try to examine why might you have these biases. Why might you have these unconscious reactions to certain things, right? Again, we're not trying to call anyone racist, or we're trying to just identify where are maybe their blind spots that exist in your subconscious that could impact your decision making. Like, if all of us want to be ethical decision makers and have ethical behaviors, we should hopefully want to be trying to discover where maybe blind spots exist. And so this test is just a way to hopefully get you in the frame of mind that, yeah, maybe there are some things, hopefully not really egregious things, but maybe there are some things that I need to try to realize about myself to figure out. Okay, and so I would ask, are you an ethical decision maker? Are these bias tests saying anything about you? We're going to explore some of these prejudices and biases in today's lesson as well. So originally, I hope before these tests and before today's lesson, you think that you are objective, right? I hope that you think of yourself as someone who is not overtly racist. Is not overly sexist. You do things with good ethical, moral values, right? So I would ask, do you have the illusion of objectivity then? If you believe this about yourself, perhaps you have the illusion of objectivity. And I'll go so far as to say that we all have the illusion of objectivity to some degree. And that is the notion that we're free of the very biases we're so quick to recognize in others. Okay, so let me repeat that. So the illusion of objectivity is the notion that we're free of the very biases we're so quick to recognize in others. And so these biases could be very, very contrary or very, very against what you really believe, what you will, speak from the mountaintops, what you will tell people that you are. But you may still do them. You may still do something that goes against your fundamental value system, right? And that is because you may have the illusion of objectivity, right? You believe something, yet you still act in a way that goes contrary to that belief system. And so we're going to explore some of that today. And again, this is not an exclusive or extensive list. This is just some ways that maybe we can recognize these biases, recognize some ways that we have the illusion of objectivity. And so 4 of those ways are implicit prejudice, in-group favoritism, overclaiming of credit, as well as conflict of interest. So the first scenario we're going to take a look at is this. So I'm going to tell you a scenario, and I want you to try to figure out the answer, or the answer to the riddle. It's somewhat of a riddle, not just a scenario. So here it is. The scenario is this. A father and his son are driving down the road. It's rainy, it's dark, it's slippery, and so they're driving, and their vehicle careens into the shoulder and hits a tree, and the father is killed instantaneously, and the son is in critical condition. Helicopter flies in, flies the son back to the nearest hospital that he can get treatment. And so the helicopter lands, they push the son to the emergency operating room, and then the nurses are there prepping him for surgery, and then the head of surgery comes in, and the head of surgery looks down and says, "Oh my goodness, I can't perform this procedure, that's my son." And so my question is, how is this possible? What happened? What do you think? So go ahead and think of potential reasons that this could be. How could this surgeon's son be on this table? Right? So many of you should hopefully give me some answers, and then we'll think about it. And so ultimately, the answer that hopefully we get to, hopefully this comes right into your brain right away, but in all likelihood, we've gone through a few answers that are not the potentially obvious one or the simplest one, which is that this surgeon is his mother, not grandfather, not adopted, not whatever other answers that may come forward, because I've heard them all. Believe me, I've heard every answer that you could think of before I hear mother. And so this is something that we call implicit prejudice. Bias that emerges from unconscious beliefs, right? So if before this scenario, I asked you all, do you believe women can be doctors or surgeons or head of surgery at a hospital? I hope that all of you would say yes, yes, of course they can. Why would you even ask that question? And then my next question is, then why didn't you immediately say that possibility instead of all the other potentially different possibilities, right? Does this mean you're sexist? No. But there are biased responses that emerge from all of us because of an unconscious belief, and belief, I'll use this term belief not pretty loosely. We don't believe it, but it's just something that's kind of been ingrained in our heads, right? Perception through association, right? We're associating head of surgery to be a man. We're associating that to be a specific demographic, potentially even, right? But why, right? Why? Because we've seen it so many times. We've seen this association over and over and over in media or whatnot, through people talking, through reading, through wherever. And so therefore, that's what we perceive, right? We don't believe it necessarily, but that's what we perceive. It's as simple as knowing that if you hear thunder, you think rain is going to happen, even though sometimes it doesn't, right? And so we're not saying that these perceived associations are wrong or bad. Like, this is human survival. This is instinct. We learn these things through repetition, through time, because they help us to survive. They help us to make faster decisions, faster conclusions. But sometimes these associations are just approximations and not always true. And if you continually follow this prejudice and allow it to kind of change trajectories of lives or people, then you can have negative impacts, right? So think about if you are the admissions officer for a high-level medical school, and you think women can be doctors and men can be doctors, but you have some unconscious belief that makes you admit men at a higher rate through no greater skill or no better application, but just through some implicit prejudice or some unconscious bias. And I'm not saying this happens all the time, but I'm saying, what if this can happen, right? What if this possibility is there? Don't we owe it to ourselves to explore that possibility and to try to stop the possibility? And that's not only men versus women or this type of job. This could be anything. This could be against races. This can be against men. This can be against any kind of demographic. It can be against kids, right? So we want to make sure that we are aware of our implicit prejudice and try to stamp it out. Because implicit prejudice arises from the ordinary and unconscious tendency to make associations, it is distinct from conscious forms of prejudice, such as overt racism or sexism, right? So clearly, the devil we can see in, white supremacy or very sexist behavior. These are easy to see, easy to look at and to condemn as wrong, right? And so that's not actually what I'm fighting here. We're not trying to help people identify that, because it's out there for everyone to see. But it's the things that we do unconsciously that perpetuate a potentially bad situation that we want to make sure we deal with, right? So that is implicit prejudice. So the next scenario I will ask you is, how did you get your last job? So I'm not sure if all of you have jobs, but some of you do, and I could ask, how did you get your job? How did you get your job? And so answers will be, I applied, and I went in, I walked in, dropped off my resume, or my dad's friend hired me, or my friend recommended me, and so those things can happen. Alternatively, I can ask you, have you ever helped a friend get a job? Have you ever referred someone? Right? And so, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then you could be guilty of what's called in-group favoritism. And again, this is how the world works, right? You work off of connections, right? I trust someone else's recommendation. That's why I asked them, right? So again, none of these things are necessarily wrong, right? In a vacuum, I can see the situations. Of course, I want to take the recommendation of my friend because they know what I'm looking for, they know what I want, all this kind of stuff. But if you are getting someone else a job through your connections, or if you got a job through your connections, does that in effect favor you, right? Are you biased towards your group? Is your group biased for you, right? And so the answer is yes, right? The answer is naturally yes. Of course I'm going to favor my group. Of course I'm going to favor my family. Of course I'm going to favor the people that I care about, right? But if that is true, then what does that mean for others, right? Favoring those in your group effectively discriminates against those who are different from your group, okay? So if you favor your group, help them get further, help them advance, get them favorable positions, whatever it may be, are you discriminating against different groups? So let that sink in a little bit, okay? So this is not active discrimination against them. I refuse to choose them. It's more I choose to choose my group. And again, no one is saying that this is necessarily wrong in terms of you wanting the best for your people, whoever they may be. But is it not the same thing as discrimination against others who are not? So ultimately, you have to decide for yourself. Is favoring one group the same thing as discriminating against another group? Right? Do you favor your own group, and by doing so, create a different group to be put down? Okay. That's a question that you need to reflect on, and we can all need to reflect on, because it happens. And it is not something that people want to admit, right? Of course I want the best for myself. Am I willing to do that while letting others not get the fair shake? Okay. The next question I'm going to ask is going to be sensitive a little bit. I'm going to ask, what percentage of your work did you complete? All right. If you worked on something with someone, so the last presentation you worked on or the last group work you did, think about how much of that work that you did versus how much of that work you think your partners did. Okay? And so you all have worked on these ethical presentations, how much did you do? And so we're going to write all these things on the board, and we're going to compare and see what everyone thought of themselves versus what everyone thought of their coworkers. And so this overclaiming of credit is bias that favors you. So we call this overclaiming of credit. If you have claimed that you did, say, 50% of the work, your partner said that they did 40%, and the other person said they did 25%. Like you can do the math here, right? There's more than 100% of allocation of work, and so if you overclaim the credit, what does it actually mean, right? That actually means that you are overrating what you did, right? But if you overrate what you did, that underrates what your partners did. Right? So in reality, we tend to overrate our individual contributions to groups, which bluntly put tends to lead to an overblown sense of entitlement, right? If you think of yourselves more highly, you are judging people unfairly, the others unfairly, right? You are putting them down, giving them less credit, you're giving them less opportunity, right? And if you do this, then your partners will see this, right? Your partners see this, and that ultimately leads to them not wanting to do as much or to doing less because you think they are worth less or they contributed less, and they all resent, right? Like if you believe you did more, and then someone else gets the promotion or someone else gets the raise, you are going to resent them for their success because you believe you deserve something more than someone else, right? Again, and that is going to cause unrest in your workplace. That's going to cause unrest in relationships, and this is all because people tend to overclaim credit, right? Overclaim what their value is, right? I deserve more, right? If you deserve more, then theoretically someone else might deserve less. I'm not saying it has to be kind of a zero-sum game, but like, if you think you deserve more, what does that say that you believe about other people? That's the whole point. Okay? And the fourth one is called conflict of interest. And so everyone biases situations that help them, right? Again, this is not going to be difficult to understand because we all do it, right? We're all people who tend to favor ourselves. And by favoring those who can help us, that's going to help us, right? Conflict of interest leads honest, ethical professionals to unconsciously make unsound and unethical recommendations. So we're going to read an excerpt from this reading, and just to illustrate the potential of this problem. So we're going to start at paragraph 2 for conflict of interest. It says here, physicians, for instance, face conflicts of interest when they accept payment for referring patients into clinical trials. While surely most physicians consciously believe that their referrals are the patient's best clinical option, how do they know that the promise of payment did not skew their decisions? Similarly, many lawyers earn fees based on their clients' awards or settlements. Since going to trial is so expensive and uncertain, settling out of court is often an attractive option for the lawyer. Attorneys may consciously believe that settling is in their client's best interests, but how can they be objective, unbiased judges under these circumstances? Right? If making a decision one way is going to benefit you more, are you going to recommend or tend or go towards that direction? Right? Because it benefits you, but perhaps not your client, or not your neighbor, or not your friend. Right? Conflict of interest matters. And we all succumb to that problem. So ultimately, how do we stop all these forms of bias? So there are 4 of them. And so 1, trying harder is not enough. Trying harder is not the solution. I'll tell you that right now. Seminars, courses, these aren't going to solve the problem, right? I know people who have done seminars on these kinds of things who don't believe there's an issue, and so they never change their mind, or they never kind of realize things. To solve this problem, we need to be aware of the unconscious, which is kind of contradictory. How can you be conscious about your unconscious? But we all have to understand that these biases exist, be aware that they exist, and only then can we address them. If you don't believe you have biases, how are you going to try to deal and manage your biases, right? Be aware of your biases, and then you can hopefully slowly kind of eliminate them from your life, right? So 1, collect data. Unpack and audit your decision making. Look at yourself and look at what you've done and how you've done it. Are there biases in decisions that you've made? 2, shape your environment. Create a balanced environment so that your decisions are influenced by others that are diverse from you. Right? If you only have people around you that have the same way of thinking as you, then you'll always make the same types of decisions. You want people to have conflict with you so you can have a well-balanced form of decision making. Broaden decision making, which will change your viewpoint. You can see the other side, you can see other cultures, other people. And so this quote, I'll end with this quote. Only a person ignorant of his own identity is capable of a truly ethical decision. So think on that comment, think on that quote, and then we will unpack that. So what I want you to do, complete this reading that I've posted, and then I want you to make some Edsby posts. So 1, I want you to think of a time in your life where you believe that you have been guilty of in-group favoritism or conflict of interest. Share that moment and explain the results on Edsby. And then 2, I want you to comment on someone else's post, right? Talk about it, share that you've done something similar, or talk about that instance or whatever it may be. Just comment on them to have a discussion about it on Edsby. So that's your work to follow up this lesson. Thank you.